All right, we are here with Evan Drellich. He has a new book out called "Winning Fixes Everything: How Baseball's Brightest Minds Created Sports' Biggest Mess." Thanks so much for being here, Evan.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, now this off season for you has been pretty different compared to last year's. Now this year you're promoting a book. Last year you were reporting widely on the owners' lockout. How has this year compared to last?
Yeah, the lockout, I think, contributed a little bit to the delay of the book. I would have liked the book to have come out a little sooner, but the lockout took up so much time and attention. I mean, really for a lot of people in the sport, but certainly for me, because I was, that's my beat. I had to cover
Mhm.
that, and I tried to cover it as thoroughly as I could. I think in the end, the book is actually coming out at a great time. The earliest it probably would have come out would have been maybe the fall, late in the season last year. But I actually think this works out well. But yeah, it's from my day job perspective, it's not the worst thing not to be embroiled in a really long and extended controversy, which is really what the lockout was. It was, a lot of contentious reporting, and that's frankly draining. And by the way, the book is a lot of contentious reporting, and so it's been a
Yes.
lot of that for me in the last few years. But I, this is the path I've chosen. So
Right, right. Well, digging into the book, like that's the main look at it was the group of outsiders coming in to run a team and disrupting things. Would you say MLB was a little bit naive in thinking that a team of built of outsiders would operate within the boundaries of the rules?
I don't think you want to paint outsiders with a broad brush as outsiders are bad, outsiders are evil. I think it's good that the sport basically allowed access and entry for new voices, right? Whatever industry you're in, you I think typically would want to see conventional entry points like expanded. I mean, even in journalism in the last decade or two, it used to be like to become a team beat writer, you had a very kind of set path. You start lower level newspaper, and that's kind of disintegrated, and that's been good because you get different perspectives. There's probably a little bit of something lost in some cases where people might not necessarily have the fundamental reporting training of the past, but overall net positive. You have different voices that previously wouldn't have gotten opportunities. I think MLE was certainly naive in its implementation of video. The video replay rooms are put in place in 2014. This is the year that's the final season under Bud Selig. Manfred takes over, and he puts out this letter to fans. It's a PR statement, basically, right when he takes over. But one of the things he's trumpeting is how technology and replay are going to contribute to the game. And the irony is that Manfred was the point person for MLB on PEDs. He understood how the nature of players, how cheating arises, and somehow, despite his and MLB's experience with PEDs, they didn't look at what was going to happen if you gave players and staffs these video tools. And then as far as like the front office culture stuff goes with outsiders, Jeff Luno and Jim Crane were very specific outsiders that you can imagine outsiders who don't come in um, and who aren't as hell-bent on bottom line results, who maybe plan a little better for other considerations besides wins and profits. And that was really what did the Astros in, was the single-minded focus on those things.
Mhm. Now, but heading towards the sign stealing in specific, how widespread was stealing signs amongst other teams other than the Astros?
You mean electronic sign stealing?
Yeah.
Well, look, we know the Red Sox and Yankees were punished for behavior 2017 and earlier. So, the Yankees are one of the earliest examples we have of it. The book reports that the Dodgers were using a base runner system, which is the same thing the Red Sox and Yankees were doing, and Red Sox were doing in 18 as well. What is generally my reporting and people I talk to believe that the veteran contending teams in that period, 15, 16, 17, 18, maybe bleeding into 19, before MLB's really kind of cracking down. They 19 is the first year they're more aggressive with actually policing it, not perfectly, but they're more aggressive. But probably there were, a collection of teams. I don't think every team, but veteran contending teams that were using their video rooms to get signs to the dugout, to then get those signs to a runner on second base. And that's what we call the base runner system. The Astros took that a step further, or multiple steps further, depending on how you want to look at it, right? They were using that base runner system on the road in 2017, but at home, you didn't need a runner on base. This was entirely an off the field cheating scheme where the footage from center field went directly to a monitor in the tunnel, and from there you directly communicated with the hitter. You weren't even feigning the contributions of a runner on base, which at least gives you, you can argue about how much worse or not it is. And if somebody wants to take a stance that, look, any cheating is cheating, I think you're within your rights to take that stance. But the short answer is, we know, I mean, look, teams have been punished. We know that other teams were doing the base runner system. I think it's very easy for people to be like, oh, everybody was doing it. Really? Okay, well, go get that evidence. Go get the firsthand accounts of everybody doing it. I don't think that's right. I think it's right that there were some teams that were doing the base runner system. But what we don't have are any firsthand accounts, any firm reporting that anybody was doing anything to the level the Astros were. And, that's why I think the Astros stand out to everybody. A, they won a World Series that year, but B, the scheme they were undertaking was evolved from what some other teams were doing.
Right on. And I mean, we know from your book that there was a lot of involvement in the way that the Astros were implementing this, but should Jim Crane specifically, should he have been aware of the Astros cheating?
I think particularly owners would have, you can imagine some owners being very hands-on. You can imagine some owners being more removed. Jim Crane in the early years of the Astros really did let Jeff Luhnow kind of run it. It's not that he wasn't involved. He certainly was aware of major acquisitions, major expenditures. He got involved when some scandals cropped up, the Brady Aiken scandal, Astros draft pick they didn't sign. Crane basically commands Luhnow to make a final day offer, an increased offer. I think there's more plausible deniability that an owner would not. Owners are sometimes around the team, but they're not always in the clubhouse. That an owner is simply more removed than a general manager is. And so, yeah, do I think it is entirely possible that Jim Crane did not know the Astros were cheating? Sure, it is theoretically plausible that he did not. Now, in a way, I'm not sure that question is. I don't know if it's a key question, because it comes back to the culture and environment that Crane and Luhnow builds, and that Crane allowed Luhnow to build. So, I say that an owner might not necessarily know. I don't say that to say that nobody should be necessarily excusing Crane in this. And I think it's quite notable that even before Crane got to Houston, even before he owned a baseball team, his outside businesses had major culture scandals. There was war profiteering charges, sent people to federal prison. There was a large discrimination lawsuit brought against his company that was settled, and Crane has always denied in all of those instances any involvement, any knowledge. I think at some point when you have a leader of a business, an owner of a business, and you have these three major scandals befall them, you start to step back and go, wonder what's this guy doing with his culture? How is he running things? How is it that his three businesses just happen to keep running into major issues? I think that's a question people need to ask.
Definitely, definitely. Now, I want to kind of go back a little bit to you mentioned the early days with Jeff Luhnow. Did Crane's confidence in Jeff Luhnow ever waver early on when they were losing so many games?
Crane always stood by him publicly. When I was reporting on, it's really kind of the first story looking at how people were perceiving their culture in 2014. Crane, he basically threatens my access, and defends Luhnow. One of the chapters in the book is called The Coup. It's also about 2014. And it describes, a lot of people in the Astros front office were under the impression that the manager, Bo Porter, and the team's president of the business side, Reed Ryan, son of Nolan Ryan, were trying to get Luhnow ousted. And, the story that people on the inner circle tell is that Jeff actually at one point thought he was going to get fired. And then it turns out that Jim Crane was calling a meeting with Jeff to tell him what had happened and that, he's safe. And Porter ends up being fired, right? The manager ends up being fired. And it sets off a period where Luhnow and the president, Reed Ryan, are not simpatico. They never got along very well. So, whether Jim Crane at any point was wondering, did I really do the right thing here? Or are we really going in directions we shouldn't? I mean, there is that incident with Brady Aiken where Crane steps in and says, we need to up this offer. The Astros had been very public about their innovation, right? There was that famous Sports Illustrated story in 2014. George Springer on the cover says, "You're 2017 World Series champs." And there was another story that was done not long after by a guy named Joshua Green at Bloomberg, prominent political reporter. The reception, fans loved that story. Astros fans did, but there people in the industry and even inside the Astros were like, "What are we do? Why are we out here trumpeting how great and smart we are when we haven't won anything yet?" And it was ticking people off, right? It looked like felt very ego driven. And there was a soft gag order that Crane issued, right? Luhnow for a time just stopped doing interviews. This is while I was covering the team. And eventually he had to talk about different things that happened, whatever it was, Aiken, et cetera. So, Crane, the other thing I would offer on this, Crane and Luhnow both faced a lot of pushback and public criticism in different ways in their prior existences. Crane had a very messy public divorce. He did not like the coverage of that. Luhnow got some pretty negative press in St. Louis. There were people who tried to basically run him out of the office in St. Louis before he gets to the Astros. And so I think both of them were a little determined, to kind of push through resistance. And you end up at a point where you can ask a question of, all right, well, if you're so convinced of your own self-righteousness and proper methodology, well, how do you know if you ever go off the rails? And lo and behold, the Astros went off the rails.
Yeah. Well, I just keying in on Luhnow a little bit. I mean, you mentioned that like Crane was, well, we know Crane wasn't exactly hands-on, not entirely hands-off either, but Luhnow, of course, he had a very hands-on approach to handling specifically lineup and strategy decisions. Was that really unique at the time compared to the rest of the league when he took over the Astros?
Certainly that's proliferated more since, right? This sense of synergy and between front offices and the field staff, right? The manager, the coaches, et cetera. I think the Astros were on the earlier side with that. I don't know that if you go back to 2012 and you have Brad Mills, the manager at the time, who's quoted in the book talking about his experience with Luhnow and the things that he wanted him to do on the field. I don't think it was truly we know, like I have not read the Joe Madden book, but we know that these are things that Joe Madden has talked about. I think it's relatively common. There was a sense that, who's really calling the shots in LA? Is it Dave Roberts or is it Andrew Friedman? So these issues have grown in recent years, but I think the Astros were early, right? They were moving. Part of the whole, essence of the Astros was that advantage would lie in the speed of adoption and moving quicker than others, and that hurts them in many ways. They moved very quickly to build a database, ground control, ended up getting hacked into. Probably the security could have been a little bit better on that thing. Not to excuse a federal crime, but speed was an operative. It was a goal. They felt that being in front of the pack was going to create advantages, and it did in many ways. But it also, when you have these questions of buy-in and convincing people, hey, we're doing things the right way, when you're trying to move quick, those things are harder. And the Astros suffered for some of it.
You mentioned ground control. Do you think that Chris Correa deserved such the punishment that he got? Like, it was, I guess, a federal crime. He got 46 months in prison and a lifetime suspension from the MLB. Did he deserve that?
I don't know if it's really on me to say what somebody deserves when it comes to a federal sentencing guideline. He ended up his sentence was reduced. He was let out early. He didn't serve the full 46 months. I do think it's very jarring. I even say in the book, it's not every day that a baseball executive is sent to federal prison, particularly not for hacking into another team. So, the whole incident was kind of stunning. Certainly the feeling inside the industry with the Cardinals was that the Astros really wanted it punished severely. That Crane and Luno and the Astros were out for blood in this. It was an embarrassing incident for the Astros, but the book goes into this. There's this whole other question attached to it of did the Astros take information from the Cardinals? And the reporting for the book. So Chris Correa alleged this. He alleged it in public statements. He alleged it in court. The reporting for the book has a couple Astros employees talking about, we did have Cardinals information available to us, which would suggest that there was impropriety, wrongdoing on part of the Astros. That they also took information from St. Louis when all their executives migrated over. And that was never, aggressively pursued by really anybody, by MLB, I have no knowledge of how deeply the FBI or Department of Justice looked into it. So that was a tricky, complicated mess, I guess is the point I would leave you with on that. And there's a lingering question of, what else happened? One thing Correa said in court was, I told colleagues, meaning colleagues at the Cardinals. Well, everybody, that's never been further explained. So who did he tell? Who knew what? Is that statement true? And, as MLB often wants to do in the case of scandals, they tried to move on from it as quickly as they could. And that's not surprising. That's what the commissioner's office wants to do when there are scandals.
Now, famously, I think it was Sig Meidel's account that he hacked into. Should Sig Meidel have been held accountable for his kind of lax password security practices? And was he?
I mean, the Astros in general should have done better with their security practices, whether it was password hygiene, if you want to call it that, or literally the build, the coding of ground control. It was built up very quickly, and there was advantages to that. But even if you get away from the hacking scandal, one of the things the Astros are dealing with in later years is this question of technical debt, where their coding is not in great shape to keep evolving and be adaptable going forward, and so they have to deal with that. Sig Meidel ends up getting removed as the head of R&D. I never, that was never explained to me, and I never saw it as really a direct response to hacking. Even at the time it happens, Correa has not been sentenced yet. This happens in late 2015. Correa doesn't get sentenced till early 2016. But there was a sense that we're gonna change the leadership atop this really key and essential department we have here. But SIG, the Astros were still a victim of federal crime. SIG should have had better passwords. SIG is also really close with Jeff Luhnow. This is one of his buddies back from St. Louis, somebody that Luhnow has helped put in the spotlight, helped build a brand in baseball. And one of the problems that kind of arises is that even after SIG gets taken off of R&D, he still has this voice and input into Luhnow, and is trying to still kind of sway the draft model and some of the things that the R&D department under its new leader, a guy named Mike Fast, is doing. And so that probably leaves you, to kind of go back to your original question, was there a little too much favoritism presented to Sig Mejdal throughout his time with the Astros? I think you can ask that generally. I do think it's hard to say, I'm going to discipline you because somebody committed a federal crime, right? If the question should he have been disciplined, it doesn't ring quite right to me. Should the Astros, and it wasn't Sig doing the coding he did the models, but there was another developer there, a guy named Ryan Hallahan, who really built up the database. Should Ryan, should Sig, should Jeff have made sure that security was better around the thing? Yeah, I think that's reasonable, and so do security experts I talked to, even at the time, and some of that's in the book.
You know what? Actually, what I came away with from all of that was just how I was amazed at how bad the password security was with the organization. Like, coming from, I work for a pretty big corporation myself, and we have really, really strict password rules, and it's just crazy that an organization in Major League Baseball would not have that kind of security in place. But talking about Sig Mejdal a little bit, I guess just curious, how have former employees of Luhnow, how have they adapted the Astros model around the league? So like Elias and Mejdal in Baltimore, Stearns in Milwaukee, so on.
Stearns is a little bit more his own person. It's not like he got to the Brewers. It's actually interesting. If you go back, I remember this at the time, and you watch his introductory press conference in Milwaukee, he's not standing up there saying, we're going to be the Astros part two. It's Stearns had come to the Astros from the commissioner's office from the Indians. The team at the time that was from Cleveland, where he'd worked in the front office there, and he was a different guy. He was somebody. There's a colleague in the book who says, he had the smell of success on him from the second he walked in the door, and he was going to be okay, even if this whole thing fell apart. So in a way, Stearns was kind of a balancing force for the Astros in those years. It didn't prevent they still had a boatload of stuff go wrong in 2014. 2017 in particular are just wild years in Houston. But yeah, in general, the Astros became kind of the flag bearers for analytics. You get the Moneyball A's. Red Sox were kind of in those early years. People looked at them. Theo Epstein, the Cubs a bit. Andrew Friedman, the Rays, and the Dodgers. It's not like the Astros are the only team innovating and introducing analytics and new methodologies. They do put the spotlight on themselves, right? That there's an ego with Luhnow, and he does attract attention and embrace it. He likes that positive publicity about how smart and progressive the Astros are. And so, yes, you do see across the league in different ways a lot of the things that the Astros were doing. I don't think all of that is attributed to the Astros. The Brewers did reduce their scouting staffs. The Orioles reduced their scouting staffs. That was something the Astros were ahead of the curve on. Kind of this pivot to video. Now that you have really good data you can get from videos, people go, well, why should I pay to send a scout to double A or whatever. The Orioles notably tank, right? They take that path again, and over time I've come to look at tanking as a grift. It is it is a really genius bit of marketing that owners do. You're convincing your fan base you should appreciate and believe that me spending no money on the product you are buying a ticket to go see is worthwhile, because at some point in the future, a couple of these players might help you. It's a cost-saving measure. Yes, baseball system does provide draft picks, but the Astros are a great example of the draft picks don't always work out, and you still need to build a whole team around them. Mark Appel doesn't throw a pitch for the Astros in the major leagues, just made his debut last year, 9 years after he signed with the Astros. Brady Aiken never signs with the Astros. That was the other first overall pick. And then, Carlos Correa obviously makes it, does very well. And Bregman, who's the replacement pick for Brady Aiken, does well. But, there's a chapter in the book called An Idiot Strategy, and that's a Bill James quote talking about tanking is an idiot strategy. That's Bill James saying it. It's not Evan Drellich saying it. So I think tanking is it's a cost-saving measure that gets marketed really well and has become accepted by fans, and I think it's almost too bad. Teams, look, you're gonna have to have some ebb and flow in performance, like that's never going to go away, but the total dismissal of effort, like, yeah, we're just not trying for 3 years. Our team's gonna suck, and that's good for you. Wow, that's really, it's bold, and you got to give some credit to the owners because they pulled it off, right? They've convinced people this is smart, but attendance drops and it does hurt in some ways.
For sure. Running at a time here, so we're gonna ask a few more questions. But you mentioned kind of the public perception. What can people outside of the baseball world take away from the cheating scandal and Houston's overall organizational culture?
Yeah, I mean, I keep telling people, and I do believe it. Like, this is more a management culture book than a baseball book, right? Like, it's a management culture book in a baseball setting. Do we have a few descriptions of on-field occurrences and, crack of the bat? Yeah, I guess, we have some on-field stuff in the book, but it's not much. It's really about how this organization was run in the last 10 years and even beyond. And it's a question of change management. There's a guy I talked to for the book named John Cotter, who's somebody that Sig actually, I think, might have been one of the first to mention to me. But he's a change management expert. And there's this whole field of study dedicated to, if you're trying to innovate inside of an organization, what is the best way to do it? How do you get a large business to make changes? There are a lot of pitfalls that you can run into, and the Astros ran into a lot of them. I know the draw for a lot of people into the Astros. I see it on Twitter. It's the sign stealing stuff, and the sign stealing stuff is very compelling, and the book has new stuff on it. But what I think the book delivers is a much larger picture. Well, how did we get here? How is a baseball team really being run? And this team that everybody was saying was really smart and innovative, and they were in a lot of ways. But what else is going on? What else comes with it? And hopefully, I think the book succeeds that way, and I hope people feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean, early on for me, I did key in on a lot of the change management stuff. I mean, at the time that I was reading it, my organization was doing a lot of changes, and there's a lot of talk in there about making the hard changes, because if it felt right, they would have been done already. But that kind of got me thinking a little bit about some of the changes that were made, and whether they were used as an excuse, because there were hard changes as an excuse to make unpopular changes. But so with that said, if if they hadn't been caught cheating and everything was exposed, there was a lot of conflict in their corporate atmosphere. So was a messy ending like that inevitable for the Astros?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like you already kind of saw that, right? Even before Ken and I break the sign stealing story, not long before, but you have the Brandon Taubman incident, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you, the reporting for the book shows, this was not some out of the blue thing that, oh my God, how could anybody never seen this coming, right? There had been a prior incident where Taubman left an employee in tears, and management did nothing. There was no, no discipline, no that I'm aware of, no stop sign put up, and so yeah, it was inevitable, I think, that there was going to be a disaster of some sort. I think it'd be hard to sit there and go like, yeah, no, definitely they were going to end up cheating. They did end up cheating. And there were cultural elements that made the environment really ripe for that. And, you see how the culture progresses and evolves and the different problems they run into. I do think the Astros were a tinderbox. Yeah, it was a matter of time till something went really wrong.
Yeah, and because they had a lot of, and Jeff Luhnow had that kind of Silicon Valley background. One of the things that their model was kind of featuring was disruption. Disruption is a word that comes up a lot in the book. In light of the cheating scandal, was the World Series title the ultimate vindication and reinforcement of that disruption model?
Sure. If sports fans are very conditioned. Well, what else do you want besides the trophy, right? This is the goal is to win, is it not? What's the business's goal? The goal is to make money. And I think the book hopefully takes people to kind of a different question of, okay, but what comes along with it? How did you get there? What did you do? Do the means to the end ever matter? And the Astros are actually kind of the most concrete example we have of the means to the end mattering, right? Because the 2017 Astros did hold up that trophy. And at the end of the day, I think for most people, maybe, hardcore Astros fans aside, people realize, well, something has superseded that, right? In terms of how that team is regarded, the memory of that team. Basically a question of, well, would you cheat again if you could? The problems the Astros caused for themselves by doing that. Did the benefit outweigh the cost? I don't think so. Maybe some people would say yes. But yeah, is the trophy all that matters, or is how you get there what matters to some degree? In some cases, I think the Astros are the extreme of that. But for years, you go back 10 years, the amount of slobbering over the innovation and progress being made in the sport, there was a lot of smart things being done. There were not nearly enough people, and I'm very proud that I was one of the reporters who was actually paying attention to this. Like I was listening to other stakeholders in the industry besides the high-ranking upper management people, going, what are the other effects of this? What is it doing to labor? What is it doing to pay? What is it doing to staff? It's not. We're so conditioned to look at it in this one prism of does this cheaper player help me win more games, right? And everybody gets conditioned to be their own fantasy baseball general manager, and it overlooks so much, and I hope the book shows people what that kind of thinking overlooks.
Yeah, there's so much more than the cheating scandal, and in this book, and I think I mentioned this in the DMs in Twitter between you and I. Like it's my favorite book of last year and this year.
I appreciate that.
It's a great read, and I highly recommend folks check it out. So we're gonna let you go because I'm sure you've got lots more talking and interviewing about this book to do, but thanks again for joining us. How can people follow you and find the book?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, just at Evan Drellich, Drellich, and the books should be available anywhere you get your books. Big online retailers or little indie bookshops. We like little indie bookshops. So, but yeah, if you just Google "Winning Fixes Everything" book, it'll come right up.
Great, Evan. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.